I have 9 o'clock, and I'll call the April 21st, 2025 Board of County Commissioners meeting to order. I do recognize we have a quorum. Vice Chairman Thomas, will you lead us in our invocation?
Let us pray. Our most kind and dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today thanking you for all the blessings in life. We want to thank you for taking care of us, God. We want to thank you for giving us a beautiful day yesterday to celebrate Easter, God. We thank you for giving your Son that he went and died on that cross so we may have eternal life. God, we want to ask you just to be with all our emergency services, our fire, our police, our sheriff, our EMS, everyone that goes and answers that call, God, to come and help in time of need. We ask you just to be with them, take care of them, keep them all safe. God, be with us as a board, God, as we make decisions going forward for this county. God, may you just lead us as only you can. God, we ask you just to watch over us this week and just thank you for giving your Son to die on the cross. And just please forgive us of all our sins. In your heavenly name I do pray. Amen.
Commissioner Royce, will you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members of the board, you have the agenda before you. I would like to add an item immediately after the adoption of the agenda to discuss the qualifications of serving on the Board of County Commissioners. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Any further discussion? Having hearing none, all in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, the motion is approved. All right, first item, qualifications of serving on the Person County Board of Commissioners. Mr. Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So late last week, I was informed that Commissioner Tracy Ellickson, who, as you all know, has been on a leave of absence for several meetings now, filed in Person County District Court a lawsuit. And relevant only, the only thing that's relevant about that for our purposes is that he's listed as a citizen and resident of the state of Virginia. I spoke with Mr. Ellison late last week on Friday, and he informed me that he is still a resident in Person County. He needs to consult with his attorney who's handling that matter, and they may or may not choose to amend the complaint to show that. But as of now, we have a sworn statement that he is a citizen and resident of Virginia. Mr. Ellickson has asked that the board extend his leave of absence for one more board meeting so he can have time to confer with his attorney. I understand the attorney's office was closed for Good Friday, and then can provide us some information. So I think before you now, the board needs to have a discussion about next steps. There are several possible next steps. The board could extend his leave of absence. The board could declare the seat vacant. I think a legal proceeding that's sworn out is sufficient for that. Happy to answer any questions that you as board members may have about the process and where we are.
So, given the sworn document that was signed, regarding the disqualification process, is there any, can we get a statement from the State Board of Elections, the School of Government? Mm-hmm. And can, I did talk to Commissioner Allison on Friday, and I told him exactly what was going to be discussed today. Mm-hmm. And I told him that, that any resident could go up to the Board of Election. Can you explain that?
Yes, sir. So there's a couple of ways that someone's eligibility to be an elected official, a county commissioner, can be challenged. One, the board, if there's sufficient evidence, can declare a vacancy. Two, any citizen can go to our local Board of Elections and, it's essentially file a complaint. They're not complaining, but they're notifying and asking for an investigation. There is a more exotic action called a quo warranto action, and someone can file a lawsuit. But I think as a practical matter, to your point, Mr. Chairman, any board or citizen has a right to ask our Board of Elections to look into this.
my biggest concern is future votes being compromised from this board. If it's a 3-2 vote, or any vote for that matter, if it can be legally challenged moving forward with a vote that is contested, a 3-2 vote, and his vote was in the affirmative or against, that entity or whoever brought up a particular issue can legally challenge and saying that vote should be null and void.
And if I may, I quite agree with that. I think really what the board ought to do is either extend the leave of absence or declare a vacancy. I think at this point, until Mr. Ellickson's residency has been settled, allowing him to vote as a member could create it could compromise the county on any vote that he participates in.
So I would like for the record to clarify, when you say extend the leave of absence, we never voted to allow him a leave of absence. The email that I saw that came from him, and I know the newspaper has reported a couple of times that he requested a leave of absence. And I know where they picked up that word, it was used in the email. But the way I read it, he declared that he was taking a leave of absence. And the request part of it was that he requested for the manager to suspend any payments to him during that time. But this board has never taken action, and that's been a misconception in the public that I've been asked about many times. And I have said, he has to resign. We don't have any authority to have him removed based on, where things are right now. And so that was without knowing he had moved to Virginia, or at what point he moved to Virginia, or you're saying he told you he did not move to Virginia?
That's correct, ma'am. So I learned late last week about the court filing. And as I said, it's a sworn document. When I spoke with him on Friday, he said he is still residing in Person County, and he'd provide some documentation about that. And
He did, or he would?
he would, and that, but he has not as of today.
So this court document that you referenced, that you shared with us by email, is dated April 14th, 1 week ago.
Yes, ma'am.
And so on last Monday, he swore to his attorney, who was the notary, that he was a resident of Virginia.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you're saying, the only way I see that being different on Friday is if it wasn't true when he said it, which is perjury and a felony. If he moved between Monday and Friday, but you're saying he didn't state that. If he moved between Monday and Friday, I think that would be an issue for this type of case where stability is tantamount. I don't know what his attorney can come back and say, or would come back and say, that would change what this document signed and sworn 1 week ago says, and that is that he's not a resident of North Carolina. And as far as something written from the School of Government, this is a Coates Cannon blog from the School of Government.
Yes, ma'am.
And it says, under the North Carolina Constitution, you must be eligible to vote for an office in order to hold that office. Article 6, Section 8 says, the following persons shall be disqualified for office. With respect to any office that is filled by election by the people, any person who is not qualified to vote in an election for that office. If a sitting board member becomes disqualified, most likely by moving outside the jurisdiction, but also by being convicted of a felony, he or she must leave office. Votes cast as a sitting member after the disqualification is discovered are subject to challenge, and actions of the board can be thrown into question. So it goes on to say by the author, the member should resign. So we took an oath of office, and we all took the same oath of office. So I have mine here, and it says that I do further swear that I will well and truly execute the duties of office of County Commissioner according to the best of my skill and ability, according to the law, so help me God. One of our duties is, according to General Statutes 153A 101, the Board of Commissioners has and shall exercise the responsibility of developing and directing the fiscal policy of the county government under the provisions and procedures of the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. So one of our biggest responsibilities is approving a budget. I have here our budget calendar And approving a budget is more than being here to adopt the budget in June. The first thing that we had on our budget calendar was the annual retreat in February, on February 18th. He was not here for that. The next thing we had for the commissioners was that the CIP was presented to us. That was at our last meeting. He was not here for that. Today, we have on our agenda the adoption of the CIP. He is not here for that. It was also in the last article that the paper wrote that he was eligible to return today. But he has been eligible, as far as we know, to be at these meetings and has willfully chosen not to. We don't know when he moved. But today, he actually is not eligible to be here because 1 week ago, he swore that he was not a resident of Person County or North Carolina. So the process to replace him can take 60 days or more, according to what I read in the general statute.
ma'am.
If we go out 60 days, we're already past the budget adoption, not on, well, according to our schedule. And so with all that in mind, I mean, he did not disclose this, so he could have been here today. He could have voted on our CIP, and then that could be challenged. We don't know how long we could have gone on with meetings and voting and have all of that challenged, including through the budget process. So I make a motion that we vote today to declare that seat vacant.
Okay. Now, and I agree with what Commissioner Wilburn has said regarding the leave of absence. There's no such thing as a leave of absence. You can call it a leave of absence. But this board cannot grant a commissioner, you can excuse a commissioner from a meeting, you can excuse a commissioner from voting on a particular topic. But when it comes, basically, when that email that he sent back in February was just letting this board know that he was not going to be at any of our meetings for the next 8 weeks. There's no such thing as a leave of absence, so just want to clarify that. And we do have a motion on the floor for the vacancy to announce that there's a vacancy on the Board of Commissioners. And everything Commissioner Wilburn, I'm in agreement with everything that Commissioner Wilburn has said because she's reading it by the book. I take this matter very seriously, and the timing of this happened on Thursday, and of course Friday was a holiday in most business places, and we're here this morning. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything by the book in this process, and we're doing our due diligence. And I feel that there has not been enough time to elapse the attorney to look into everything. My question is, hypothetically, let's say he files another court document, this time stating that he is a resident of Person County. Does the previous document supersede anything that happens after that point?
That's a good question. I mean, we'd have to see what he says. So if hypothetically he tomorrow filed something and said, I'm now a resident of Person County, I think it would be upon Mr. Ellickson to explain that to the board and what that means. I will say if the board votes to declare a vacancy, as the board knows, you're required to receive consultation from the the executive board of the Person County Republican Party, because Mr. Ellickson is a registered Republican, about a replacement. And so there is some time, and I think, I've never seen it done before, but I think the board could vote to rescind a declaration of vacancy if new evidence came forward. So you've got some options. The other would be to wait. If the board chooses not to vote today, I think you could wait till your next board meeting to make a final decision, and presumably then we'd have more information.
Right.
So, Mr. Attorney, do you feel that you don't understand all the elements of what go into this?
No, ma'am, I think it's very clear, and I think you said it very well, Ms. Wilburn. I'm merely pointing out, I think the board has some options. I think the board could certainly declare a vacancy today. I think it would not be improper if the board said, well, let's wait till the next board meeting and see if there's more information. So I really, from a legal perspective, don't have a concern either way.
All right, members of the board, you have, we have a motion on the floor to declare a vacancy. Is there any further discussion on this? All right. Call for the vote. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
All right. We have a 2-2. I will entertain that the same motion be tabled and be brought up at the next meeting in May. All right. Anyone care to make that motion?
I make a motion that the decision be brought up again in May after the attorneys have spoken and we've received more information, so that we would just have more information regarding this decision after the attorneys have spoken.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right, 3-1, motion carries. Madam Clerk, please note that that needs to be added to our agenda,
To the first meeting in
first
May.
meeting in May. Thank you.
Let's hope we don't have a split vote for the budget.
All right. Next, item 5A, recognition, Volunteer Appreciation Month proclamation. All right. Whereas volunteering changes the lives of volunteers and the community in a positive way, increasing self-confidence, self-esteem, and physical well-being, offering the chance to make new connections, providing opportunities to learn new skills and abilities. And whereas during the National Volunteer Week, we celebrate the impact of volunteer service and come together to assist community needs and to foster a culture of civic engagement. And whereas the National Volunteer Week was enacted in 1974 by President Richard Nixon to celebrate the spirit of volunteerism, urging all Americans to seek opportunities to provide service to their community. And whereas volunteers have directed countless hours to meet the needs of Person County, and whereas Person County recognizes the volunteering improves our quality of life, straightens our communities, increases community participation and ownership, and volunteers are vital to the future as desirable, caring, and productive counties. Now therefore, the Person County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim April 20th through 26th, 2025 as National Volunteer Week, and calls upon all citizens to increase their participation in our efforts to support and increase volunteerism in Person County. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
I have a motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion is approved.
Catherine, wasn't there a luncheon or something that was gonna happen related to this? I
No,
saw a
we're not.
certificate that went out.
Right, so we sent out thank yous to all of our volunteers on the advisory boards and committees that support county operations, and we have also ordered a gift which will be given to all volunteers at their next meeting to show our appreciation for their service to Person County. So we would like to thank them. I think we have at least a couple in the audience. Would y'all like to stand up if you serve on our volunteer boards and committees? All right. Thank you, Mr. Newell, for your service on the air. Okay. We've got several out here. Thank you all for being here. So we do appreciate the work that you do on behalf of the county in the spirit of volunteerism, and enjoy working with all of you.
Agreed.
Thank you. Next item is Child Abuse Prevention Month proclamation. Carlton?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate this time. So we have the proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Month, April 2025. So whereas children are our state's most vulnerable members and most valuable resources helping to shape the future of North Carolina, and whereas child abuse can have a long-term physical, psychological, emotional, and physical effects throughout an individual's lifetime and is a serious problem affecting every segment of our community, and finding solutions requires input and action from everyone. And whereas in year 2024, 66 reports of suspected child maltreatment were assessed by Child Protective Services in Person County, and over 100,000 reports were assessed in the state of North Carolina. And whereas children who are loved and nurtured grow up to be healthy, creative, and productive community members, and whereas it is the goal of Person County to improve the quality of life of all children who live here, and we acknowledge that in order to solve the public health issue of abuse and neglect, we must work together as a community to increase awareness about child abuse and to continue to promote social and emotional well-being of children and families in a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. And whereas we recognize the need to prioritize kids and invest in more preventative initiatives like home visiting and family strengthening policies, economic supports, and community-based child abuse prevention programs at the national, state, and local levels.
Now therefore, in recognition of child abuse prevention, the Person County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim April 2025 as Child Abuse Prevention Month, and call upon all citizens, communities, faith groups, and medical facilities, elected leaders, and businesses to increase their participation in our efforts to support families, thereby preventing child abuse and strengthen the communities in which we live. Adopted this 21st day, April 2025. Do I have a motion to approve the proclamation? All right, we have a motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion's approved.
Thank you all. Appreciate that.
All right, next item on the agenda, informal comments. Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir, we do have 4 individuals signed up today.
All right, 4 individuals. Normally we have a 10-minute period, and since we have 4 individuals, I will recognize 3 minutes per person. Would that be fair to the board?
I think there's some people in the back that may want to add.
I'm sorry?
Maybe speak as well.
Sure. All right. All right, being that we have 5 individuals, we'll make it 2 minutes per individual, okay? And, Madam Clerk, will you call the first person, please?
Yes, the first person is Amanda Hayes Bowman, and if IT can set the timer for 2 minutes versus 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Amanda Hayes Bowman. I'm a resident of Roxborough. I'm here to speak on the need for a public pool in Person County. A public pool offers numerous benefits to the community, including jobs, increased patronage to local businesses, and a place for people of all ages to enjoy time and create memories. My husband and I drive to Chapel Hill every Sunday afternoon to take our 3-year-old to swim lessons because there's not a place for him to learn to swim in Roxborough. I know of other families who take their children to Danville, or perhaps those who may have access to a private pool in Person County, but for most families, these options are simply not feasible. Many children in Person County are growing up without learning how to swim, and many adults in Person County still live with a fear of water because they grew up without access to a pool. Knowing how to swim is not just a recreational skill, it's a fundamental life-saving ability. All kids, regardless of race or class, should have a safe, inclusive, and affordable place to play. Swimming is also a source of exercise accessible to people of all ages and can be a lifelong activity to promote physical and mental health. A public pool would offer a communal hub to bring together people in our community and create a stronger sense of togetherness. As temperatures continue to rise, we need a place to cool off, and it would be a public good that benefits everyone in Person County. So I'm requesting for county commissioners to apply for the Thriving Communities Grant under the EPA to help fund this project. A public pool has been talked about for years, but now is the time to make it a reality for Person County families. I appreciate your time and look forward to working with you on this issue. Thank you.
Next speaker we have is Teresa Torrain.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
My name is Teresa Torian, and I am a Person County resident living in Allensville. I come before you today in support of a public swimming pool. I was one of nearly 60% of voters who voted yes in 2008 for the referendum on the pool. The pool would benefit many of Person County's residents, but I'll start with my home and personal beliefs. I have a chronic health condition called lipedema that causes daily pain. There is no cure for this condition, but there are recommended conservative therapies that can help slow the progression. The most recommended of these therapies is pool therapy. So this includes swimming, water walking, and water aerobics. And each time I see a specialist for my symptoms, I'm encouraged to get in the water as much as possible. And then I must explain that I live in an area that does not have a public pool, and I would need to drive a significant distance to access a YMCA or a recreation center. And driving to Durham or Orange County frequently is not feasible really for anyone. So let me be clear, I understand that there are multiple private pools located in Person County. However, I am uncomfortable joining these private pools because historically, many of these pools have excluded families that look like mine. My children would benefit tremendously from a public pool as well. I have 4 children. 2 are adults and have not been able to access a public pool while living in Person County. The younger 2, though, still have time. They only benefit from pool time when we visit to see my family in Iowa. I am fortunate to have a family member who has a pool. For that 1 week in summer, my children can experience water. They learned to tread water last summer. Hopefully this summer they'll have an opportunity to get more time in and learn how to navigate floating and just some beginning swimming skills. They deserve access to a safe public swimming pool in their community, and the voters of Person County felt strongly about this before they were even born. Sadly, the commissioners of 2008 and successive boards ignored the people's voices. You have an opportunity to listen to your constituents today. A public pool would keep money circulating here in Person County. I grew up in a community that had 2 public pools. Oh, and I'm out of time. So thank you for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
The next speaker we have is Julie Nye.
Good morning. My name is Julie Nye, and I live in the Deep Creek neighborhood in Mount Tirzah precinct. Obviously, I am not a native Personian, but I've lived in Person County for the last 21 years. I'm also here to speak in favor of a public pool. Other comments have noted how a pool would contribute to the overall quality of life here in Person County. It would give kids something to do. It would help boost economic development efforts by being an additional draw for employees to come and live in Person County. And also, of course, being a great first job opportunity for teenagers. I know a lot of kids I grew up with had their first job as a lifeguard at a public pool. But I want to speak primarily about the importance of every kid, really every adult, knowing how to swim as a safety issue, but also as a confidence builder. I am not a strong swimmer. My first experience with the water was as a toddler playing at the ocean with my back to the water, and a wave came up and came over me, and I was terrified. But I had swimming lessons when I was in kindergarten, and because I knew how to float, I've never been afraid of getting pushed into a pool or pushed off a dock or falling off a boat or my canoe tipping over. I'm not afraid of the water. If you don't know how to swim or even float, any body of water can be scary and dangerous. Let's give every kid in Person County the confidence to enjoy the water resources we have. Thank you.
Next speaker we have is Sam Lyas.
Commissioners. Hello, my name is Sam, and I am the community organizer for Person County with Down Home, North Carolina. We are a nonpartisan organization that works in rural communities to ensure housing, education, healthcare, economic opportunity, and access to clean air and water are rights and not just luck. I'm not originally from Person County. I live just over the line in North Durham, but I am a product of the rural South. I know firsthand how rural folks have to make very little, have to make a lot out of very little, because that's what we've been conditioned to do after decades of disinvestment in rural communities, just like Person County. In the 2 years I've been organizing here, I've knocked on hundreds of doors and I've had hundreds of conversations across this county. One thing I hear again and again is there isn't anything for people to do. When I ask what would make things better, especially for kids in the summertime, a public pool is always mentioned. Tragically, despite having opportunities in the past to build one, former leadership chose to send the money back twice, and now here we all are, years later, asking for the same thing, a publicly owned pool. This is not a left versus right issue. This is up versus down. Working class people, the majority, cannot afford, access, or feel comfortable in the few private pool options available in this county. Person County deserves a place where children can learn to swim, schools can have access maybe to a swim team, elders can have a place to exercise, and everyone can cool off in the summertime. A public pool is not a luxury, it is an investment in the health and future and safety of residents of this county. That is why I'm asking the county to prioritize funding for a public pool. I know budgets have already been considered for this year, but going forward, considering it a line item. Until then, there are federal grants through the Thriving Communities Grant, through the ERA, through the EPA, providing up to $350,000 for community infrastructure projects just like this one. The application, from what I understand, there is only 7 pages long. Apparently grants can get very long, so this one's pretty reasonable. And the first deadline is April 30th, with a second one being in the end of July. We're happy to support with any information, outreach, whatever it takes to make this happen. Thank you so much.
And our add-on speaker.
Good morning. My name is Kendra Coggins. I have been a resident of Person County since 2019. Today I humbly come before you to ask you to invest in Person County with a swimming pool. The pool would be a small cost for a great benefit. Over 80 people have passed away in Hyco and or Mayo Lake. What if having a swimming pool would actually save lives? I mean, we are a county with 2 lakes. Personally, I learned how to swim at a very young age. Swimming was a part of our summer vacations. As a very avid swimmer, I took swimming for college credits. I've run triathlons. I was on a swim team in Durham. What was summer camp without a swimming pool? I humbly come before you today to ask the commissioners to right a historical wrong. I mean, if we're being honest, after desegregations, pools across North Carolina were closed. They were filled in with concrete, with dirt. They were privatized. Here in Person County, we still live with that legacy of closed and privatized pools. It's a history of residents denied. A grant came through this commission twice to build a pool, denied, returned. The YWCA a proposal came through these halls that was denied. John Hill worked on a beautiful pool with a beautiful plan, again, denied. It's time, y'all. It's time to fix this. This isn't a race issue anymore. It's a class issue. If you can't afford the private membership, which is about $600, it changes whoever calls, or the insane wait list. Some of us, they tell a 2-year wait list. Some of us, they tell a 2-week wait list. If you can't afford to drive to Hillsborough or the Sportsplex, there's no access to pool for you. Let's be clear. I'm going to boldly make this prediction. We're getting a pool. Thanks to Ms. Thomas for offering lessons at Olive Hill, but we're going to get a pool. Private and public efforts are afoot. Guys, we won't stop. The question I have for you is, what side of this will you be on? Do we have your support? Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our informal comment period.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item on the agenda, discussion, adjustment, approval of the consent agenda. Are there any adjustments? Having here none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, a motion to approve. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion's approved. Under new business, item 8A, opiate settlement funding recommendations and update. Janet Clayton and Richard Johnson.
Good morning. As the staff person who works with the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee, I come before you today with a request to approve a funding resolution. Just a brief history.
Is the clicker on? Sometimes it gets turned. Oh, I think.
Okay, sorry. Person County, along with other counties and municipalities across the state and the nation, engaged in the national opioid settlement. North Carolina, for its part, is receiving $56 billion as part of this payment. In Person County, we are expecting over the next 16 years a payout of $4.8 million. There is a memorandum of agreement which governs the expenditure expectations and reporting requirements of these funds. As coordinator of the committee, I work with the finance department and the other subrecipients to ensure that all reporting requirements are met. In October of 2022, this board established the Opioid Settlement Advisory Committee, which consists of 13 positions from various stakeholders across our community.
That was in their choice.
So this slide indicates the anticipated payment schedule of the $4.8 million. So far, we have received $1,416,700, and another payment is expected soon. The most recent data that you will find on the State Corps website is this information that's before you, with the Person County overdose death rate of 40.3 per 100,000 residents for 2023, and this equates to 16 deaths. In comparison, the state had 4,442 overdose-related deaths for a rate of 41 per 100,000. As you can see, Person County is among the highest with overdose-related deaths as of 2023. We selected, or the commissioner selected option A. There were various options as part of the MOA. And in option A, there are 12 strategies. The two with the gold or yellow stars are the ones that received funding allocations last year in 2024. Number 6, the early intervention option strategy, and then number 8, the post-overdose response strategy. The purple star indicates the one that I'm here to request funding for today. Just a quick update on our currently funded initiatives. Person County Schools is the subrecipient. The funding allocation was $300,000 over 2 years. They have currently hired a substance use education specialist who coordinates various initiatives for all schools, but primarily concentrated at Person High School and Northern and Southern Middle Schools. They, so far as of the end of January, have received 81 students referred to their individual and group programs. They also partner with Insight and VIA and other community partners to offer community-wide, not just for Person County school parents, but other schools, initiatives to increase awareness. Strategy 8 is the Person County EMS post-overdose response team. They received allocation of funding of $407,517 over 2 years. This year's been a startup year for this program. They have updated job descriptions. They're working on recruitment and training of personnel, and they have entered into an agreement for the software, which will aid in the care management and data collection initiative. Okay, for the request for today, strategy 4, this comes to you from Freedom House Recovery Center, and this is for a halfway house. This halfway house will offer 24/7 staffed care. This will be for 9 males. The house is located within the city limits. It has been completed and received its certificate of occupancy. However, prior to licensure, Freedom House must have this house fully staffed with trained individuals and fully operational before the state entities and the local mental health agencies are able to license and certify this home. The clients will be there for 6 months. They will engage in a comprehensive outpatient treatment plan for the first 60 days. They will also be connected with a peer support specialist. The primary target population for this is uninsured or underinsured low-income men over the age of 18 with a primary diagnosis of substance use and no recent history of violent behavior or sexual assault. And I do have Joyce Harper here from Freedom House if there are specific questions about the home. I have provided for you in your packets a draft resolution to approve the appropriation of the $205,114 if the board sees fit.
Any questions for the health director?
Yes. So Freedom House operates out of the Health and Human Services building,
Yes.
but this facility would not. This halfway house would be in the city. Is that the one that the city council approved some time ago, or is this another one?
This one is located on Main Street.
It's the
It's
same one. So have the police chief and the sheriff and the emergency services director had an opportunity to consider this and provide input?
Yes, they all serve on our Opioid Services Advisory Committee. And at the last committee, those that were present did vote to support. In December, during the first presentation, we tabled the recommendation because the House had not received the certificate of occupancy at that time. And so once we were notified of that, Ms. Harper brought the proposal back to the committee, and that is when we voted to recommend funding.
Okay, and then going back to the slide about the years and the amounts, how do we receive that? Why is it different? Why does it fluctuate so much on what we get or what we expect to get each year?
It's the way the settlement is structured from the nationwide level, and then it comes to the state, and then, well, actually, we get funding directly from the pharmacies and the distributors. We received notification, I think, last week of 2 upcoming payments, so we received notifications as to when the payments are coming, but these are projected amounts as to how many we will receive each year. And we receive like a bolus at the beginning, and then as companies decide to pay, some pay off earlier, and then, so that's when it fluctuates, is when they decide they're going to go ahead and submit those payments.
So are those funds allocated every year, or is there a balance that's sitting there?
It is in a special fund that's labeled opioid settlement. We have to keep those funds separated from the general fund. And then as the resolution format is structured, like last year in April, when this board funded the first 2 initiatives, it was stated that that funding was for over 2 years. So we split it into 2 years, like Person County Schools received $150,000 this year, and they'll receive the $150,000 next year.
And so, do you know how much is in there now?
The last report I pulled was the one, it was, we had received the 1.4, and Person County Schools had drawn down about $60,000 at that point, because they provide the services and then they bill us or invoice us, and then we pay. So
there's over $1 million.
Yes.
So I noticed last year it was 10. It went up to 16, which is I mean, one of those graphs. I understand how they have to track it equally across the state, so they divide it by 100,000 citizens. But we don't have 100,000 citizens, so it's like 0.04% of our population, which is too many. But going from 10 to 16 is a big jump. So are there other initiatives on the table and that can be done in conjunction with this?
There is a substance use disorder committee, SUDS, that's through Healthy Personians, that again, it convenes various partners across the county. We have last year and this year we have had faith-based initiatives where we convene ministers across the county, because a lot of times they are our first line, of contact for individuals or for families of those individuals. And so we have offered the mental health first aid course for that group, and there are several other initiatives. In Plain Sight is one that Insight has offered a couple of times that parents can go, and it's actually a mock bedroom, and you have a chance to look and see if you can find the paraphernalia, and it's very surprising some of the places and ways things are hidden. So.
Well, I just know in last year's report, which was based on 2022, like this one's based on 2023, we were 19th in the state, which, now we're among the red counties of the highest. So I just think, can we look at more?
Yes, and there's
more.
also I'm sorry to interrupt, there's also a co-responder model. There is a person, his name escapes me right now, but he does co-respond with some of the law enforcement calls and EMS calls. He's based out of Burlington, and I think that's working well.
And then the last question is, so what happens June 30th of 2026 with this house?
Hopefully June
Program.
30th of 2026, they will be up and running and they will have billable services through VIA and other entities that will help cover their cost.
So it'll become self-sufficient?
Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I actually, I don't want to say happy because it's not a word because of the situation. But I thought about, we invest a lot into prevention efforts, a lot with children, and then the post efforts after someone has overdosed. So I just believe that having in between when the people who are struggling or going through a challenging time with this disease, because that's what substance use is a disease, having something in place. And as Commissioner Wilburn was saying, like other, with those numbers being so high, this is like one step, but however, still looking at some intervention type, because we do focus a lot on the kids and when someone has overdosed, but those folks in the middle who are challenging with this, like what things we're going to have in place for them, because we don't want them to get to the point of overdose. So yes, I just see this as one step to addressing this disease.
Do I have a motion to take action on this?
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Do we need a specific motion for the allocation of funds?
That's included within the resolution.
Commissioner Wilburn, will you also be willing to include in your motion to authorize the use of $205,114 from the opioid settlement funds for the use in identified spend and strategies for the period between May 1st, 2025, including June 30th, 2026?
Yes.
All right. We have the motion on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, public records request policy. Brian Hart, Chris Puryear.
All right, good morning. And apologies if I sound a little nasally this morning. I'm a little under the weather. But on February 5th, 2024, the Board of Commissioners adopted a public records request policy and revised it on September the 16th, 2024 to reflect the use of Next Request as the county's portal for receiving, responding to, and managing public records requests. And then September 30th, we implemented Next Request as communicated on the slide there. To take a look at the policy, a policy at a glance, a couple of the notable aspects of the policy include outlining the responsibility for records. The county department, that is the custodian of the requested record, will be assigned the public information request. Each county department will have a department liaison who assists with gathering information, preparing responses, and communicating with management, IT, and the county attorney as needed. Another notable component of the policy is the portion that pertains to redacting protected information, and it states that if the content of a record is partially public and responsive to the request and partially exempt, then the exempt portion of the content will be redacted. Redaction is the process of masking or removing sensitive information in a document before releasing it for public use. And then last but not least, there's another component that pertains to special service charge for producing records. And that component states that the special service charge will be applied when searching, retrieving, copying, and refilling or refiling records for a public records request or a group of requests submitted by a single requester on the same business day. If it requires more than 4 hours of an information technology department employee's time, or more than 4 hours of clerical or supervisory assistance. The requester will not be charged for time spent redacting confidential information. The special service charge will be an hourly rate in accordance with the lowest paid employee who will be conducting the work.
So a couple of things I wanted to add to this. So public records themselves are records that are generated when conducting public business. All right, so there are certain things that are not public record, and the attorney certainly can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, please. But certain personnel file information, there are things that are protected by NDAs, like economic development contracts. There's also protected infrastructure, stuff that's protected by Homeland Security Administration. So there's many things that are not considered public record, including even if someone is using a public resource personally, right? That is able to be reviewed by a supervisor or the governing board, but it is not eligible for public inspection per se. That is not conducting business at the time of that occurring. So that brings in the mixed records piece that Brian was talking about there, as far as needing to redact some of those or even remove some of those from the public record response. And those things do take time. We don't have a full legal team that can review each and every one of these. We have seen email requests in the 30,000 range before that we've had to go through, and by we I mean county staff overall, because they're not my emails, right? Our servers house them, but they're not my records. I didn't generate those emails unless I generated those emails. But so the person who generated those and is responsible as a records custodian has to go through those, determine which ones are responsive. And in a request as large as 30,000 records or even 10,000 records, you're looking at the potential for something to be released that should not be. So we have to be very careful with that. And again, that's where the redaction comes in, and where the amount of time comes in is making sure we don't release something that we should not release. Fair enough? All right. So the next one there are type of records that do get requested on a regular basis. Property records, permits, code violations, 911 calls, and again, some of that information also has to be redacted because there may be HIPAA information in there or personally identifiable information. Investigative or criminal, which again falls under some weird stuff if we have an investigation ongoing. Yep, saw the sheriff in here earlier. If we have an investigation ongoing, some of those things are not public record as well. Animal control, voter records, employee salaries, contracts, and just general email requests are a majority of what we see come through. And honestly, I would say most of what we see are emails or communication requests come through the Next Request system. There are some records that get requested outside of this process. We are trying to make sure everyone follows the process and puts them into that centralized repository. But with that being said, these are the numbers that we have currently that have come through the Next Request system. The majority of them are related to emergency services, as you can see there, the sheriff's office, county manager's office. Those are the three biggies there. And county manager's office does include the Board of Commissioners. Any questions on that before I go to the next one?
I have lots of questions and comments, but I can wait till you're done.
All right. As far as reporting goes, this is through last month, so March 9th. We've had 102 requests come through the Next Request system. 95 of those have been closed or responded to. There are 7 that are still open, or at least there were at the time. Is that an updated report?
Yeah, we do have an updated report.
Okay.
Next Request has been really integral in helping us keep better records and better tracking of the requests that we receive. So as of April 13th, this is a bit more recent, we've received 133 requests. 123 of those requests have been closed. 10 remain open, primarily for research purposes. 25 of the requests were deemed overdue. 3 were paused. There were 15 requests for which we had a late response to some extent. And again, that could sometimes be attributed to the volume of records that were requested, or volume of emails in particular that were requested by the requester. And so this updated performance report from Next Request that was generated has been included in your board packet for additional inspection if you wish to do that.
So the ones that are noted that are overdue, kind of to Brian's point, some are staff constraints. Yeah, we have vacancies. We also have other duties throughout the day to complete. Some of them are
the redactions, if it's a large request, having to go through and redact a large amount of information or make sure that we don't release something like I mentioned previously that's not supposed to be released. So those are typically what you're seeing there. It's not just somebody said, well, I don't want to give this information out. It's going through a process to make sure that we release what we're supposed to release and that we protect those that we're supposed to protect. Not that we're trying to hide anything, but we do have a duty to protect confidential information specifically for our employees, and certain contracts, things like that we have through economic development and other protected data. So.
And I would add that most often, even when a request hasn't been fulfilled, we've still maintained communication with the requester to keep them updated about our processes.
So the last piece there is discussion. The response time frames, Brian kind of mentioned already. Staff time, we are spending a lot of staff time doing this, and there's not honestly a good way around that. I don't have a solution to that. If anybody has one, I'm all ears. The staff costs, there are some IT costs related to it as far as if we do have to print, if it's requested in a hard copy, if we have to spend an exorbitant amount of time putting it into a format that we don't already have it in, the clerical and supervisory piece, making sure that data doesn't get out that shouldn't. The cost recovery piece there again kind of goes into that same thing. And the next request, we've got the contract for that for, is that a 3-year contract?
It's annual.
Annual, okay. So we've got that in place now, and we'll have that through the end of this year at least because of that contract. But the process itself seems to be working well for us. Again, it's just a matter of having the staffing and the resources to respond to these requests in a timely manner. On that note.
Okay, I couldn't fully prepare for this because there were some dates referenced about when the policy was put in place and why, and when this new software was requested and why. So kind of on a side note, when we switched from having the commissioners' packets on the website to Laserfish, we lost the link to the corresponding meeting videos. And you really can't go back to YouTube and search by a date. I tried to search February 5th, 2024, and all I got was February 6th, 2023. It's hard to go back and find a specific meeting, so if there's anything we can do about having those meeting links put back with the corresponding minutes. But this was implemented in September 30th, on September 30th of 2024. But Chris, you and I have discussed this before, and you were probably here when there was, or the only one who was here, when there started to be this big increase in public records requests. So the one thing I want to try to do, and it's hard, is make a distinction between a records request like you put up permits. Okay, so if you work in inspections, you can expect that people are going to email you and ask for a permit. And that might take you 2 minutes to send them, you know where to find it. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, like you mentioned, what takes multiple departments, information has to be redacted. If you have to inform your supervisor that you received it and ask them if they need to send it up the chain. Does it require IT involvement? Does it require the county manager or the attorney? Those things that get into a lot of cost and staff time. So for me, when I was economic development director, I had them all the time. I had one in particular that took me 8 business days to complete. Of course, that was not 8 contiguous business days. I didn't take that much time away from my regular duties. But over time, I tracked it, and it was 8 days. So that was a department director salary for 8 days. They had to go to the manager to review after that, and the county attorney, because just to make sure that there was not anything that needed to be redacted or to approve before. I couldn't redact it. The attorney, and it was a different attorney then, I keep looking at TC, but the attorney would have to approve what could be redacted. So the report that's in here is a little misleading, or very misleading, because it says staff cost, dollars spent, 0. And it could be that there's just something that's not being tracked in the software yet. And I know there's a lot of components of it that aren't being used, and maybe across the departments it's not being used the same. But what I want the taxpayers to know is how much time is being spent by staff that is costing us money as a county that goes into these requests and how frequently we're getting them. And so, Chris, can you give a little bit of background before 2024 of how we got here?
I
From your
can
perspective.
give some. I also have, you guys referenced the UNC School of Government Codes Canons earlier, so I have a document there I want to reference as well because of something you pointed out about the amount of staff time that we do spend on a lot of these. The way this particular document, this is the Special Service Charges for Extensive Public Record Requests that was published in 2023 by Christina Wilson, specifically states, in contrast, staff time reviewing and preparing a response does not qualify as an actual cost that we can be reimbursed for. So it has to be above and beyond what our typical, and again, Mr. Attorney, if you please would correct anything I say incorrectly, but anything above and beyond what would be a typical response or above and beyond a standard duty of the job. And so, you know, typically my duties aren't to go pull emails, but I also don't know that that's something that we could actually charge for if we actually had to go through and do that. So those costs are, for the most part, lost as far as we're concerned. We can recover costs for materials like paper, things like that. If we have to buy a USB drive or a CD to mail it off, we can recoup those costs. But the staff time itself is largely a loss to the organization. I have been here since 2005, technically 2006 officially. Technology has changed. Because of the change in technology, you know, it's somewhat easier for folks to access information, but that also means there's a lot of information that we have to go through to be able to provide that access. So before, you know, when it was, well, where's the building permits? Well, here's a filing cabinet, go look through and you can pull that record. Now they're all digital, so we have to go through and pull those records or combine them, bring them to the individual user who's requesting those. So while technology has made it convenient in some ways, it has made it inconvenient in others because of just the massive amounts of data we have to go through to collect that information, or at least to retrieve and deliver that information. I would say, as far as public records requests go, we had very few, at least that went through IT. We had very few that went through IT until maybe 2015-ish, maybe a little before that. 2017 is when I became the director of the department, and so I tend to think pre or post that, but 2015 is about the time I'm thinking we started to see a lot of those, and there were a lot of things going on with email and other things like that at the time that people were requesting. I think we've seen a lot of increase in FOIA requests, specifically for things like text messages, emails, things that are not typical. They're not requesting a 911 call or something like that. They're requesting copies of communications to do investigative work, if you will, to some degree. And now, granted, they have absolutely that right to do that because that information does belong to the public. They're their records. They were generated while conducting county business. We've certainly seen a large increase, and that was my reason for noting that not everything that comes through as a public record request is noted in next request, because there are a lot of things that go directly to a department sometimes. The vital records request, I don't believe any register of deeds requests typically come through here for the most part. So you've got a lot of things that don't necessarily go through the system right now that are not being captured. And just by way of the function of how FOIA and public records requests work, we can't necessarily dictate it. We could go back and add it back into here, but then again, you're adding staff time just to do the documentation to show that it went out. But yes, I can say that we've certainly seen a massive increase. They tend to come seasonally. We see a lot around election time. We see a lot if there's something going on publicly that citizens want to find out more information about. If they believe there's something that's being withheld or hasn't been shared with them. We do seem to get a lot of requests for a specific word search. We had one that came through, and I'll share this one. We had one that came through for Microsoft. We cannot fulfill a request with the word Microsoft in it because every email we have has Microsoft in it somewhere. Either, you know, this message was generated through Microsoft Outlook because we use Microsoft as one of our primary products. So, you know, that was something that really had to be narrowed down because we were looking at hundreds of thousands of records for that. We've had things, you know, sometimes a person's last name is the same as a road name. So if someone's looking for a specific name, but it's also in someone's signature as, you know, their road name, that pops up. So we've got a lot of work that we have to do on the back end to pull out what is a legitimate response to the request, just to get the request or the response. Again, not to say that we shouldn't be doing that per se, because this is public record information. There's just honestly not an easy, clean way right now to do it without spending an absolute ton of money to do it.
Well, I would argue that we're already spending an absolute ton of money to do it through staff time and the cost of opportunity, because as Economic Development Director, who knows what could have been accomplished in those 8 days for the good of the community if I had not been having to do that. And mine was similar. The request was for anything that had the word Siemens in it. And I got lots of newsletters with industry names in it, which, you know, captured that. So, like you said, it's hard to define what it is, and I would say it's good that Register of Deeds is not coming through there. I don't think that's the kind of thing that probably the software was intended for. If I could go back and watch those meetings and see what the discussion was, I feel like it was meant to capture the kind that you're talking about, the investigative searches. So from what I've seen, it's primarily like what I would call an activist group. So we've got a summary here of 14 open requests as of today. 7 of them are from Person County Free Press, and 1 is from Election Freedom Fighter, which in my opinion is the same group. So 8 out of 14 are from what I would consider as an activist group. And so a very small group of people are impacting the work of the county in a very large way. And that is what I want us to try to resolve. And so I think, like you said, the requests are public, the information is public. So I think that whatever comes through the software should be open to the public. Put it out there for everybody to have access, and not just one group to come and take it and spin it however they want, and put the manager or the PIO or us at their mercy to have to go back and correct all the stuff that they say. Let's put it out there. Let's say who requested it, how many departments were impacted, what the request was, what the response was, and let everybody have access to share what the full disclosure was. Because there was one recently that was about the sheriff's request for funding for the jail inmate healthcare costs. So what could not be disclosed in a records request is that the sheriff did not submit that agenda abstract. The manager did it on his behalf. So it looked like in our packets and to the public that the sheriff submitted an agenda abstract that didn't have a dollar amount in it, when in fact he didn't see it. It was done administratively on his behalf for timing's sake. The bill had to be paid, the meeting date was when it was, things had to get put into the packet, and so that is not disclosed in a records request. And I'm looking at you, but this has nothing to really to do with you.
Appreciate that.
But, and then also, when was the presentation presented? Friday afternoon. Well, that wasn't the first time information was presented, but it was the way the question was worded. They got an answer to the way the question was worded, but the dollar amount was presented the same day, on the Tuesday when the packets went out. So, the records requests, don't tell the whole story, but I think that you said it's questionable whether you can charge for IT time, but if it's not in somebody's job description to do searches for records requests, then I think it goes above. Any director who's not hired, who's not interviewed about records requests, then you should be able to charge for it. If it's not a primary function, we should be able to charge for it. So I'd like to look into that. And this is not meant to deter legitimate media outlets or citizens who have a concern or one-off concern or something like that. So maybe we could waive those kinds of fees for media outlets that have valid credentials as media outlets, or citizens who state that they're citizens, just like they have to if they come up here to public comments and say their name and address. So does the software allow for all of that information to be captured and then shared?
It does. I am not an attorney or a public records professional, but I will point to one.
Yep. So I have just a couple of comments. I'll start with Commissioner Wilburn's question. The whole process is public. So if you make a public records request, your identity is public. The way the statute's written, someone's not required to provide their identity, and they're not required to provide the reason for requesting a document, but we need that contact information. So as you said, we can get back and say, hey, we need to narrow this down, or just whatever reason. So that's all public record. Now, how we make it publicly available, as Commissioner Wilburn suggesting, I'm going to bounce it back to you, Mr. Furrier. The other point I wanted to make is, this is really for the board and the public, is when we say overdue, understand that the statutes don't have a shot clock. It's not as if you have to respond within X number of days or you're breaking the public records law. The government, the school government has long said you want to respond within a reasonable time based on the size of the request and also the workload of staff. So a very large request might be something we actually provide in batches to try and be responsive as we can. It takes quite a while to fully respond. So, and I'd just say, the staff has been working very hard even on these overdue ones, and from what I've seen.
And for kind of to add to that, thank you, Mr. Attorney, the overdue piece is kind of what we are putting ourselves against from our own policy. It is not the public record law or anything like that. We are saying it is overdue based on what our criteria was for in my world, we'd call it a service level agreement, right? We expect to have a response in this amount of time. But that doesn't take into account whether it's a large response, if it has to go through legal, all that stuff. But that's essentially where that overdue term there comes from. With regards to sharing the responses to the public, personally, I think we ought to. My professional opinion on that is it is easier for us to point to existing public record information than to recreate it. So if someone's already requested, and we have had a couple of requests that are duplicate in nature, it doesn't make sense for staff to spend the time to re-pull that information all over again. If we can just point them to, hey, here's our public record portal. This has already been requested. Click here, and there's all the information you'd like to see. Search through it if you'd like. It is not, at least as I understand it, it is not any of the county employees' jobs to research the data that's inside of there to provide a report on that data, but just to provide the actual results responsive to the request. And then the recipient is responsible for going through and pulling whatever information out of that they desire. You mentioned the spin of the information that we don't necessarily have control over either. That definitely falls outside of the IT scope. I would say that would definitely be management, attorney, and PIO to address however we can with that. And I don't know how we can with that, but certainly our duty is to respond with the records and to put that out there. The records themselves are the truth that we have per se, but the spin that gets put on it is kind of outside of that scope, unfortunately.
So was there any more research done about Cleveland County's policy? We were at a meeting where the Cleveland County clerk talked about their structure.
Yeah, so I've reached out to them. It's been a little hard to kind of coordinate a meeting, but we have been in communication with them to try to set aside a time where we can confer notes and discuss our shared experiences, but I have not been able to set that time up yet. But we have reached out to them.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like to me the most efficient and transparent way to handle it is, what I've suggested and what you have agreed is to put it all out there on the website.
For me, and again, that's just me, I believe it does make it easier for us to point other people to those responses. Again, not to say this is who requested 10, 15 times, but to say the information is here already, it exists. We don't need to spend staff time recreating this. It's already here, it exists. Go through this information. If you have additional requests, then you certainly can submit that. But there's no need to repeat an existing request, in my personal opinion.
Right, but just to clarify, I am asking for the requester's information to be, and you're saying your purpose is not to do that, but if the conclusion is drawn.
Yeah, I believe that's actually what, we either post it or we don't post it. I don't think we can restrict what is or isn't posted about the requester. So once we say, the request response becomes public. In next request, I don't think we can strip out certain information about the requester. It's just, it's everything that's in there.
I think that's accurate.
So, yeah, by releasing the response publicly, you are releasing the requester's information as well, if they have supplied it, because to the attorney's point, they are not required legally to submit that information. But if they expect a response from us to be able to say, you know, hey, we need additional information, or can we narrow this down, then we need that response from them, or that contact information from them, to be able to communicate that back to them. I don't know that we've had any that did not submit their information. But there's certainly an opportunity for them to submit anonymously, and legally they can do that. But for the most part, that information is in the request, so that we can respond back to them with the results.
Right. So, I mean, one thing that I get asked lately is, you know, during the budget process, can I come and doge Person County for you? And so I think this is something that allows people to see some of where their tax dollars go, that serves no benefit to the public.
Mr. Attorney, where does the statute stand on if we set a fee schedule regarding records requests, which could be considered abusive at some point?
Yeah, so the statute doesn't have a fixed number, and I don't have it right in front of me, but essentially it says if you require extraordinary clerical time or extraordinary IT time, then you can charge a regional service charge. And I think Person County's is pretty good policy. We have it essentially over 4 hours. That could go down, that could go up, I think. And this is really a question for our county manager. I know some jurisdictions calculated on sort of the approximate hourly rate of those employees involved. I'm not sure how we calculate our fee.
Our policy states that it would be calculated on the lowest hourly rate for the employee who is involved in fulfilling the request. So we do have the 4-hour time limit established for IT staff. So when we get a large public records request, we will ask them to estimate the time that it would take to pull that information. And so far, since establishing this policy, we have not run into an instance where they estimate it would take longer than 4 hours to retrieve the records. Then it falls into the category of the employee's responsibility, who's the custodian of those particular records, to go through them. And within the system, it's possible to organize them into folders to say, these are not responsive, these are responsive, these need redaction. So when we put them into a folder for needs redaction, then they can go to the attorney's office, because they also have access to the system, to go through those records and redact them. And the statute says we cannot charge for redaction. So it's my understanding that we could not charge a fee for the attorney's time in going through and redacting. So it does say that we can charge for the cost of copying. Most of the time, the requests are for electronic records. They currently exist as electronic records, and their request to provide them in that manner. The statute also says that we can charge for, as you said, excessive clerical and supervisory time. So then that falls into the category of determining what is clerical in nature. I would say that if an employee is needing to utilize staff to make copies, the hard copies, we can charge for the hard copies. We could likely charge, if it's an exorbitant amount of copies, for the clerical time spent making those copies. Beyond that, I don't think we typically have requests that are requiring a large amount of clerical support. Then you get into the category of supervisory review. So if you have the employee reviewing it, you have legal reviewing it. There are some instances where I have had to do some level of review, but that typically has not been needed unless it's my personal records, or if I've been assisting the commissioners in their particular records. There may be some where, from the supervisory perspective, it would require the manager's review or another supervisory, but those are rare instances. But it could be that there's a certain threshold where that becomes excessive, and I think that's a bit of a gray area. We may be able to arrive at a number similar to what we've included for IT support, but we have not assigned a number to that so far.
And to your point about, the supervisor getting involved, things like that, while we've not necessarily had to have the supervisor get involved, typically the records are being requested of higher level staff, managers, directors, supervisors. So while they're not necessarily required to review their subordinates' records to get those released, those aren't the kind of records we're typically seeing requested either.
So can we make that cumulative, not just if it's 4 hours for IT, but have each person who's involved in the review, excluding the attorney, each staff person to track? And I'm not talking about adding extra duties to staff, like I said, if it's somebody asking for a permit from inspections. I'm talking about we can put a list in place and say, does it involve multiple people? Is it something that you need to pass up the chain? Does it involve IT? When it gets into that, can we start tracking it in the software for each employee that reviews it, by their function, and then charge when it gets to that point, based on the hourly staff
So
amount?
we can certainly track the time. I know for the most part my staff have been doing that anytime we get involved anyway. The way that the statute itself, and it looks like section 132-6.2b is what I'm looking at here, for the special service charge, is the request requires the responding agency to use extensive IT resources or extensive clerical or supervisory assistance, or the medium requested requires a greater use of IT resources than that established by the agency for reproduction of the volume of information requested. It goes on to state the extensive IT or clerical assistance cannot be, the request for copies has to be such that it requires extensive IT, clerical, or supervisory assistance. In other words, the responding agency cannot respond to the request within the statutory time frame as promptly as possible without additional IT, clerical, or supervisory assistance. Goes on from there to say, let me go back to this one. Staff time reviewing and preparing a response does not qualify as an actual cost. So I'm not sure.
Let's say it went to Tom, because you had emergency services one. Would he send it out without your review?
It depends on what the request is for. So typically, I'm not going to review requests related to a 911 call. They're doing that at the staff level within the 911 center. They are reviewing their records. They're determining what's responsive. If it's for the recording, then they have to modify the voice in order to remove the personal identifiable aspects of the caller, or the caller and any other personal information from that call. So I am not reviewing that. If there is a question about that, if it's not straightforward, then it might go to the attorney's office, or it may come to me for consideration. But just those types of routine requests are not coming to me for review.
For the communication type requests, if somebody asks for all of his emails to, Microsoft, even though
then
he should
generally, yes. We have not had many that fall into that category of late, since we've implemented Next Request until the last month or so. We have gotten quite a few that are now overdue per our policy because it's extended beyond that 10-day period. So these are the types of requests where I am going to be involved in the review process to a certain degree. And
So
it just
when
remains to be seen how much time that takes.
So when it's not to you, about you, but you review it, then that should count as supervisory. And your hourly amount could be charged. So what about, we could request for the attorney to itemize, if he doesn't already, when he's reviewing and redacting, and report out that amount on a monthly or quarterly or however often.
And on that note, Commissioner Wilburn, we sometimes do that for clients. We do it, I think we've done occasionally for Person County, where you have a different item with a different funding source. So if that's what the board wants, we can start breaking that out. And what we probably do is just send it as a separate bill to the county, which is, on public record.
Yeah, so as we are reviewing the budget and looking for things that are gonna allow us to, keep the rate as low as possible, I just think it's important for people to know how much money goes to something like that. And it's not just the money, it's the frustration of the staff who come to work every day with a purpose and get it derailed by these kinds of requests.
So we can utilize, and I had acknowledged in the agenda packet that this particular platform, Next Request, does provide a feature for staff to log their time as well as to log cost. So we have not been using the cost piece of it. So that's why on the report it shows up as 0. And we have not been fully utilizing, really rarely, we've communicated out in the last several weeks for staff to log their time spent in responding to requests. So those can be done by the individual staff member. We'll continue to reemphasize that it's important to enter that information. It's another click and manual. It's not that the system's tracking it while you're responding. You have to keep up with it and enter that in. And from there, I mean, an hourly rate could be calculated based on the individual and the time that it took. As far as charging goes, we can give some more consideration to when it does bump up to that supervisory level, how much time is being spent on that. You know, I don't have an hour amount in mind as far as, and we could do some research into other policies to see if there's an example that's established, or possibly we could look at that 4-hour threshold for the next month or so and see when we're hitting up against that and bring that back to revisit with the board as it pertains to the policy, because the only clear cut, we haven't defined excessive unless it comes to IT in the policy. So any feedback you have is welcome on that.
Okay, so can you put some consideration into that and try to continue to reach out to Cleveland County and look at their policy and what they're doing? And I would like to see the itemized from the attorney, and then discuss it again, whether we can update the policy at the next day meeting.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
All right.
May I add that similar to Cleveland, within our policy, it already stipulates that we would provide requesters kind of with an estimate of what the cost, what cost they would incur, to give them the option to, you know, narrow their request down, or either, you know, dismiss or, you know, rescind their request altogether. So I do know that that's kind of a parallel that already exists, something that we already have stated in our policy. So.
And Commissioner Wilburn, would you like to see past records review? I'd be happy to start from when the next request system went live in September.
That's up to.
I'm sorry? Or just going forward? I'm sorry, did you want to see our invoices just going forward, broken out, or would the board like a report of the time we put in today, starting to say September?
How would y'all
last
like to see it?
year? Okay.
I wouldn't mind looking at the past on it. And my question is, who is doing the oversight to ensure that it's not going over the 4 hours? And
So as far as IT goes, because that's where we have the 4-hour threshold, so that's something that we're checking in with IT on before they are actually pulling the record. So if IT were to flag it and say, we anticipate this is going to go over 4 hours, then we would communicate back to the requester and say, this is going to take an estimated X amount of time, and this would be the charge that would be incurred. But so far, we haven't encountered that since we implemented this policy.
But for IT, it's mostly a query, right, and results.
Correct, and sometimes we do have to work with staff to get them to understand how the software works, to be able to do their piece of the redaction or removing the not public information. But that is, again, also relatively minimal for the most part.
So the cumbersome part is on the person who's having to do the review.
Correct. And to go back with what the county manager was just saying, the IT portion is not in the policy just because Person County wanted to put it in there. The way the general statute is written for those special charges references specifically IT, clerical, and supervisory. So that is why that is in there. It is not because I said I don't want to do this. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. So we should add those other components, though, not just IT, but the clerical and supervisory.
all right, so we'll have this tabled and revisited at our second meeting in May. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, next item is the fiscal year 2026-2030 recommended capital improvement plan. Captain Kathy. and
Yes,
Tracy
thank
Clayton.
you. Yes, Tracy is also here this morning, so we're both available to answer any questions that you may have. In follow-up to the last meeting on April 7th, we did present the recommended CIP to the commissioners. And since I've had individual meetings or group meetings with those who requested, and we've gone over the plan in detail, based on those conversations, there are a few items that I've highlighted for discussion this morning. So there has been some discussion about removing the new emergency services facility from the plan. In fiscal year 26, the proposed funding for the design work and support for the grant application associated with that project was $430,200. There has been some further discussion about removing that facility from this 5-year plan because we acknowledge that there are many needs throughout the county in terms of capital needs. And conducting a comprehensive facilities assessment, which is one of the goals that was included in the strategic plan, would help us better prioritize those needs. It would map out a plan for us going forward. In working with a consultant to complete that study, they can also work with us on creating a capital funding plan in order to be able to best accomplish those objectives once they're prioritized over the next 5, 10, 15-year period. I have done some asking around as far as what this type of study may cost. $150,000 has been the most common response that I've received. So if the board desires to move forward with that assessment, I would recommend putting $150,000 in as a placeholder for conducting that type of assessment in the next fiscal year. It would do an assessment of buildings and departmental needs, conduct a space needs analysis, and help with capital planning. And then the other topic of discussion has been the public splash pad, which is in year 2 of the plan. And of course, we have heard from the public recently about a public pool. So just public water-based recreation in Person County. Does the board want to do a study to determine what the needs are and how to best meet those needs or not? Do you want to keep the splash pad in year 2? Do you want to pull that out and do further examination as to what maybe could fit into the budget in the future? So there has been a question about whether the public splash pad really meets the need. If it doesn't, does that need to be in this budget, on this budget plan? And then beyond that, is this something that we would like to further study, whether that be initially at the staff level, whether we want to incorporate some component into a comprehensive study, or if we'd want to do a separate study for public water-based recreation. So those are a few of the things that came out of the discussions that we've had over the last couple of weeks. I'll be glad, and Tracy will be glad to answer any questions that you have. And this capital improvement plan is now yours to work with and approve a plan for moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, County Manager.
Mhm.
All right, members of the board, any discussion?
I have one thing. So for the public splash pad, I've recently gotten information that I do know that another grant will possibly be coming. It's being worked on regarding a public splash pad here. So, and that information I received after meeting. And so looking at this, I know it's not for this year. Seeing if we could now incorporate it for year 2, to, to still have it within the plan, because I know this was going to be ARPA monies are going to be used for this, if I'm not mistaken, in year 2, but keeping it on in the CIP. I do know that the public is coming out, residents are coming out about a public pool, but we know it's going to be much more entailed with a public pool than the splash pad. So I guess keeping it on there for year 2 is not for next year. I know it's for fiscal year 27. However, I have information that is being grant monies may be coming to the county to for the cost of public pool. I mean, not public pool, the splash pad. So that's my only discussion. That's all I had.
Okay. Any other comments?
As far as the facility assessment, I know that EMS is in need of a building. So that was pushed out to the last 2 years of the 5-year plan, and that was a combination of like $70 million facility. And I think when that presentation was done, the location was based on choosing land that the county already owns, where the Viper Tower is, which, I think if we don't go ahead and assess all the needs that we have, we could regret putting a facility like that. Why would we potentially cut ourselves short on where it is for a facility like that based on already having the land? It may be that we find that the study prioritizes some other buildings as well, and we need to look at something that's big enough to accommodate a government complex over time. So that's my thing of, if we reduce this year by 430, then that gives us room to add in the 150 for the study, because we only have so much land with infrastructure. And we're going to be competing with, private sector needs as well. So maybe there's a better approach to how we plan out our county facilities going forward to assess them all now, and then hopefully before we would have gotten to that project anyway, we can have a better big picture.
I agree with that, and my question regarding that was, have we looked at existing infrastructure within Person County that could possibly be bought? And I don't believe that's happened yet, but I think we do need to explore that opportunity as well. So, Commissioner Werbin, let me understand your motion. It was do you want to keep the 430 in there or remove the 430? What was your
Well, what is proposed in here is to take the 430 out and add in the 150, so we're not adding anything.
Okay.
We're still gonna have a surplus if we take that out. We're not having to go find
Okay.
more money to do this
Okay.
from what was already proposed.
All right.
And
So,
I would propose that we reduce the general fund contribution to next year's CIP by the difference in
Okay.
those two amounts.
all right, is that a motion, Commissioner?
Yes, yes.
All right, we have a motion. Any discussion? All right, and just to clarify, we're approving the CIP with, in addition of lowering the 430 to 150 and reducing the allocation of funds from the general fund, correct?
Yes, and could I add just a
Sure.
couple of other notes? I know the discussion about the splash pad, we don't currently have that designated for ARP funding. In past discussions, there has been some discussion about whether or not we would fund it in that manner. In this particular plan, it's contemplated that would be funded through general fund dollars in year 2. Or we could seek additional grant funding. We do have available ARPA funding if you would like to go ahead and designate it as ARPA in year 2, or we can leave it the way it is, leave it on the plan for further discussion, because your approval of this plan is not approving
It's fluid.
any funding amount in year
It's a
2.
fluid
So
document.
I did want to note, just
Okay.
as far as the way it's presented, it does not currently include any ARPA in year 2. We just kind of stopped with year 1 as far as allocating that funding.
Great, we have a motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, the motion's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chairman's report. Would like to say that I attended the Safety Awards banquet as with the rest of the commissioners that were in attendance, and the Commissioner of Labor was there, and it was a very good event put on by the Chamber. Appreciate all the hard work everyone's put into it, and always safety first. All right, County Manager.
I would like to note that on your consent agenda, you did approve a meeting calendar amendment. So the next board meeting, the first meeting in May, which is May 5th, will be held downstairs in the auditorium. We'll be recognizing our Civics Academy graduates at that meeting. So just note to the public and to commissioners, we will convene downstairs.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chairman Thomas.
No report.
Commissioner Wilburn.
I also, like you mentioned, attended the Safety Awards banquet. I echo everything you say about that. It was a good opportunity to sit down and talk with some of our industry that was there being recognized as well. On April 10th, I attended the Civics Academy. That was for economic and community development. I think they're getting towards the end of that program, and the graduation may be at our next meeting. So all 15 members were there. They still had 100% attendance all the way through, so I think that was great. There were some good presentations that evening. I would also say that the Board of E&R has opened up the appeal window. Chairman, I don't know, since you've been on that longer than I as an alternate, that just means people can now go and make their appeals
formally apply.
now through April 29th.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Royster.
So as Chair already stated, that attended the Safety Awards, which was a nice event. JCPC, at that meeting, we learned that our youth from Person County, they won their competition with Teen Court in I think it was hosted in Greensboro, so we're proud of them. And also, I attended the Chamber breakfast in recognition of Child Abuse Prevention Month. We had some stats there as well, in educating the community about child abuse prevention. We heard the proclamation this morning earlier, so that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, at this time, do I have a motion to go into closed sessions? Closed session number 1 per General Statute 143-318.11A5 to establish or instruct the public body, staff, or negotiation agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the practice or other maternal terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or the amount of compensation and other materials of an employment contract or proposed employment contract with the following individuals permitted to attend: County Manager Catherine Cathy, Clerk to the Board Michelle Solomon, County Attorney T.C. Morphus Jr., and Economic Development Director Brandy Lynch, followed by closed session number 2 per General Statute 143-318.11A4 for the purpose of discussion of matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other business in the county, economic development, with the following individuals permitted to attend: County Manager Catherine Cathy, Clerk to the Board Michelle Solomon, County Attorney T.C. Morphus Jr., and Economic Development Brandy Lynch. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We're now in closed session.